whole small fish, if you like, trout or whatever. Now, I've got a couple of fillets out here, and I'm going to salt and pepper them and sprinkle them lightly with garlic powder. All of the ingredients which he is now showing you, and a package of onion soup mix, and a cup of white wine, and some paprika, and that's it. Friends and neighbors, that's all there is to it. A little garlic salt. Now I want to kind of make a bowl out of this. This is heavy-duty foil that I've got here, freezer type or heavy-duty cooking foil, and I want to make it up so it's going to hold my wine and my, can you see in there? I want to make sure you can see in there. Let me turn that back just a little bit on that side. Take a package, an envelope of onion soup mix, and sprinkle it in like that. Pour in a cup of white wine, moderately dry to moderately dry, not sweet white wine, but white wine. And of course, if you don't drink, don't worry, because we're going to steam this, and the alcohol is going to steam out of the wine. It's the flavor that we're after. And I'm just going to make a kind of an envelope here to steam with it, and be kind of generous with the paprika to go in there like this. And that's all there is to it, except the closing up of it. Just rather loosely, crease it off. And the oven is set on 350 degrees. And I'll steam this about 45 minutes or an hour, somewhere thereabouts. Now, let me hold this like so. Pull it open. You probably want to use a tray. You may want to use a tray anyway, but if you've got lighter foil than that, that's very heavy foil that I had it wrapped up there. And if you've got lighter foil than that, you might want to use some sort of a tray or a baking dish under that to support it, but you don't need it with that heavy foil. But that's all you do. You just let it steam, and in about 45 minutes or so, it'll be nice and flaky, tender and moist, and just right. I'll be back here in a minute. We're going to go wading to Santee-Cooper for some largemouth bass, and after that, we're going to take a horseback ride along the Blue Ridge of Virginia, and that's all coming up after these very important messages. Fish are just like all other critters, including humans, when they endure extremes of climate, extremes of season, whether it's summer or winter, they try to go somewhere to get comfortable. Now, in the wintertime, in the case of a marlin or a king mackerel, something of that sort, he's just liable to take off for the Bahamas or Brazil or somewhere like that to where the water's warmer. A freshwater fish can't do that. A freshwater fish is confined to whatever body of water he's in, whether it's a big lake, a small pond, or whatever. At night, he will go to the deeper water because that's the warmer place. In the daytime, when the sun is out, on a bright, sunshiny day in the wintertime, they will come out in the shallow water because the sun reflecting off the bottom will turn the water warmer by a few degrees, and the fish will come out. And sometimes that water, if it's shallow enough and the bottom is bright enough to reflect and really heat it up, the fish will become quite active and feed. That's the time of year that I like to wade, January, December, along in there, on a clear, bright day when you've got a nice, light-colored bottom that will reflect the sunlight, and you can wade in shallow water, water up to chest deep with waders. You're liable to catch largemouth bass. That's where I'm going to take you right now. We're going down to Santee-Cooper in South Carolina with some wading buddies of mine. Everard Hicks, who lives in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Everard is retired now, but he was the anesthesiologist, and he taught anesthesiology. I'm going to get it out in a minute. Don't correct me. I'll get it. Anesthesiology at the medical college down there in Charleston. And he was that for many, many years. He is now Professor Emeritus. I'm going to try one more time. Professor Emeritus of Anesthesiology. This is Everard Hicks, and I've known him a good many years, and I've met him doing precisely this kind of fishing. Now, the guy in the big wide hat here is David Garner. He's a pharmaceutical salesman. He lives in Charleston. And there were really a couple other guys with us, John Smith and Van Greer, on this particular day. John is with the Citadel. He's head of athletics down there. And Van Greer, but you're not going to see much of them because they were fishing another place. Now, what we're doing is wading the flats when the water is low. In the wintertime, sometimes the water will get down 2 or 3 feet at Santee-Cooper. This is the lower lake, and for you guys that know that area geographically, we're in sight of a Tiny Lun's old fish camp on one side, and we're in sight of Black's Landing on the other side. David lost that one. It jumped and threw the hook, but I got its picture. But now this fishing will come in spells. These fish will come out, it'll warm up on a day like this. Even though it's nice and cool in the morning, it might even be frosty. But when the sun gets up and the water starts to warm, the fish will hit. And generally they hit about the middle of the day for the simple reason that's when the water is the warmest. That's when the sun is more directly overhead. That's a nice little largemouth bass, and that's a freshwater lake bass. You can tell, see how pale he is. He's not one of these Cypress River dark-colored fish that you catch out of these coastal rivers. Well, I had to go ashore to change film, and when I got back, David already had 3 fish. I shot up a roll of film, and obviously I couldn't change standing out there waist deep in water. Everard hadn't caught any fish yet, and I said, Everard, we got to have more film in this. And he said, well, come on. I got a little honey hole over here, a little private place that I go when all else fails. And the moral to this story that I'm going to tell you is this: if you're a good fisherman, you've always got something in reserve, and you don't ever give up. Now, again, we're wading the flats. We're not too far from the canal here that connects the 2 lakes, the diversion canal that connects Lake Moultrie and Lake Marion at Santee. And Everard decided he would keep a few of these, the larger ones, for a little supper snack. A few little bass fillets. Bass out of this lake are very good eating, and particularly if you fillet them off the bone and then take them off the skin. They're good eating fish. This is reasonably clean water you have here, not brackish or anything. Sometimes bass will have a tendency, all sunfish will have a tendency to take on a taste from the water that they live in. If they live in real muddy water, sometimes they'll taste muddy. Crappies are that way, bluegills can be that way. And bass especially, and in brackish water, they'll have that kind of brackish taste. But out of freshwater lakes like this, and as I say, particularly when you skin them, they're quite good to eat, and these guys like to eat them. Now, we're just using plain silver spoons, and this is the guys I was telling you about. This is John Smith and Van Greer and David Garner here, the guy in the big wide hat. And they had a nice little string of fish each, and so did Everard. You'll see him walking out with his string. That's David there in the wide hat. And we were just using mostly silver spoons. Now, almost any silver or spinning kind of lure will do under conditions like this, as Everard, and I think he kept 4 of those fish. He caught 5 there in just a few minutes when we moved to that new place, that little honey hole kind of place that he had. But we're using mostly silver spoons. Now, one of their favorites down there is a spoon called the Little Cleo, and the reason they like the Little Cleo so much is it has a good wobbling action in the water, and it's heavy. It's a thicker spoon, a chrome kind of spoon. I've got one in the palm of my hand here, and it's a little bit heavy, and so it'll cast a long distance. But you notice it's got a treble hook. Now, in deeper water, where you don't have too many weeds or anything like that to fool with, this is the little lure that they like. Everard went into some more shallow water, and he was using this spoon. It only has 1 hook on it. It's called a reflecto spoon, and it runs up like that with the point of the hook up, and so it doesn't tangle up as much in the weeds. And where you've got real shallow water, you want to use something like this that's a little more weedless than that treble hook lure. But both of these are good, and spinner baits, and they used minnows like rapalas and rebels and things like that. Almost anything, really, when you've got a bright, clear day like that, and the fish are really in that water that's warmed up, and their enthusiasm is up for feeding. If you catch them on that kind of a day, a bright, cloudless day in January, February, along in there, and the water down and shallow and a good sandy, light-colored bottom so the water will warm up, you'll catch largemouth bass. I'll be back here in a minute. We're going to take a little Civil War lesson along the Blue Ridge of Virginia after these important messages.
Larson